This is Jeff Chrisman, and I'm on the Living Arts of Tulsa podcast. And I'm very happy today to have the opportunity to be visiting with artist David Douthitt. David, thanks so much for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And what I thought I would do is to start out for the benefit of viewers and listeners. And of course, I obviously would like to learn more about you and your work as well. I thought I would ask you, just in your own words, if someone were to ask you what your work and your artistic perspective mean to you at a deeper level, just anything that you might share there.
Okay, yeah. So I work in several different mediums. I'm a printmaker, a sculptor, illustrator. A lot of my work has to do with just everything that I kind of experienced in life. With my 2D work, a lot of my illustrations and printmaking, it kind of started off with my love of like comics growing up, and then that kind of led to graffiti art, then illustrations went into like tattoo sort of styles. So all those are kind of influences on my stylistic wise of my illustrations. A lot of that comes from, I grew up here in Tulsa, but I'm originally from Milwaukee. And I would go visit my family a lot up there, and I would pass through cities such as Chicago and St. Louis. And that's kind of where the graffiti came in, just going through those big cities and seeing what kind of like the whole city had to take care, like to offer basically. And that kind of fell in, with kind of similar to comics with, thick lines, colors that pop. And that's something that I definitely try to add into my printmaking. Yeah, I think that kind of maybe answers that question.
Oh, definitely. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And actually, I find this very interesting. And I'm so glad that you mentioned it. And when I'd read a little bit about you, and I realized reading about someone is definitely different than hearing it from them. So I'm definitely appreciative to have the opportunity to hear this directly from you. But it would be very interesting just in terms of what the experience was like taking in street art in some of these larger cities. Just, I didn't know if there's any experiences that you might speak to, or just any, in terms of what you felt when you were in those particular settings.
Well, like growing up, um, I just thought, like here in Tulsa, obviously it's a big city, but not as big as Chicago or St. Louis or Milwaukee. And just kind of, for the first time kind of seeing that, it's just like, wow, what is this? This is like totally new to me. I want to know what this is. Um, and so it's just kind of something that I sought out, and it was basically a big impact. This a bigger city, being used to something a little bit smaller, than seeing, well, there's this whole other world out there that I don't even know about. I'm interested in that. I want to, find out more about that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And then I didn't know if there was any particular, as far as any influences or just any, any particular artists that their work spoke to you in the early stages of your career. Or...
So yeah, I've always been really a fan of Keith Haring, Shepard Fairey, both of those street artists. I think with Keith Haring, his style is more simplistic. I know he was like known to say, like, if you can't sit down and finish a piece, then what's the point? I necessarily don't take that perspective, but I do find that, there does come a time where you need to like know that you're done with a certain piece. I think his use of lines too in his work is really influential on mine, especially in my printmaking. I do a lot of line work. I think those two kind of cross over very well together.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And actually, this is just kind of coming up intuitively when you were speaking about that, as far as sometimes the challenges of just sitting down and finishing something. I was wondering, on the flip side of that, do you find that sometimes if it is necessary to take a break, or if you feel like you need to revisit it later? I always wondered what that was like in terms of walking away. Just maybe what that feels like, or if that is a challenge. Knowing that maybe it's a work is not finished, but it's time for you to to maybe do something else for a while, or take leave of it, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something important. You'll spend so many hours looking at a piece, and it's good to step back, maybe wait a little bit, and have some fresh eyes on it to see maybe there's areas of it that need to be fixed, or if it is done. I know that's definitely been something that I've worked on, through my art progression. Uh, I started off doing sculpture in school, and I'd work and work on a piece forever, and then you think that you're done, or you just want to keep going because you think you maybe can add more to it. And, in the long run, it's usually less is more. So when you think it's done, it's probably going to be done. Adding more to it might be too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. I was also wondering too, I'm wondering, of course, not being an artist myself, so I don't necessarily know what that feels like in terms of creating a tangible or a physical object of some sort from nothing, or for not necessarily from nothing, but just in terms of with different materials. Is finishing a project a little more challenging or different than starting one? I'm assuming that there might be different challenges with both ends of that life cycle. But I just thought it'd be
Yeah.
interesting, maybe just to kind of juxtapose or see if there is a juxtaposition between the two of those things.
So I think definitely starting pieces is a lot easier than finishing. I oftentimes will have 3 or 4 different pieces of work that I'm working on, because I'll get halfway through one and then be like, well, I have this idea for this other one, and I'll start that. And that's something definitely, if you start a piece, working it all the way till the end, I think it's more helpful, because that can just keep adding up, and then sometimes you never finish a piece. So yeah, I think definitely starting a piece is easier than finishing. But then once you finish, you get that, self accomplishment. You feel very well finishing it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And to a certain degree, even though, so even though an artist goes to school, I mean, can it even really be taught in terms of knowing when a work is finished? Or is that something more that you just have to go by feel?
I think it's more by feel, because it's all up to you to when you think that it's done. Teacher can't really, he can give you suggestions maybe, but I think it's really up to the artist itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And of course, I did want to also just not necessarily completely switch gears, but also just, talking about your work. Just wanted to get some sense of, as far as, with your involvement with Living Arts, and anything you might share, just in terms of what your involvement has been like with them, and any experiences that you've had as a result of exhibiting there, or working with
Yeah.
them.
So I had a few of my prints up there a while ago for the O Tulsa Biennial. I think that was in like 2017. I thought that was really great. Just a collection of local Tulsa artists. That was when I had first moved back to Tulsa from OSU in Stillwater. And it was like, I was trying to get back into the community here in Tulsa, and I thought that was a really great opportunity. Um, and I've helped out with other friends in the past, setting up exhibits and everything like that. So I've always had a pretty good experience with Living Arts, and I've always liked to work with them again. So yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. And then also just, since we are at this unique, somewhat unique time in history, at least in this particular, with these generations currently, just wanted to get some sense of what it has been like for you as an artist, or as someone who is creating work, over the past, I guess it's been almost a year now, since the pandemic started, just getting some sense of what that's been like for you personally, as far as a human being, as well as an artist.
Yeah. So yeah, like last year with the pandemic was definitely a weird time. Before before COVID happened and everything, I was working with a program called Artists in the Schools, and so that's kind of where we would work with Tulsa Public, Jenks, Owasso, Sand Springs Public Schools, and artists would come in and teach classes. So like I was teaching ceramics and printmaking, and then COVID happened, and that all just like had to stop basically. So it was really hard to teach virtually, which it's still kind of new. Like, can't really teach throwing pottery on a wheel over Zoom. It's kind of hard.
Mm, yeah.
So, a lot of my teaching kind of, dwindled from then. But then I had a lot of time just think about where I wanted to take my art. I spent a lot of time, in my sketchbook, thinking of new ways to do sculptures, and then also just working on larger prints. I've done some woodblock prints in the past that have been anywhere from like 3 feet to 4 feet wide. And so yeah, just kind of planning out, I used kind of last year as just to plan out new projects. And yeah, it's definitely been an adjustment, yeah.
Oh, definitely. And then I was going to ask as well, just as far as, what your perspective is on, how this has affected the Tulsa arts community. And of course, understanding, if I understand correctly, that you work at AHA. And so I thought anything you might share just as far as from that perspective, or as an artist, working in this particular community, and as also someone who might be partaking of various events, just getting some sense of how you feel like the the art community here or the art scene has been affected by the
Well,
pandemic.
yeah, I know, like definitely like First Friday obviously is not what it used to be because of the pandemic. We're having to limit the amount of people that come into the galleries and museums. I think that's definitely affected it. But I feel like, you know, all the galleries in the art district have found ways to still make it where people can still see it and, experience it. Whether it be, yeah, like letting less people in at the time or doing like, I know like Philbrook was doing like me time. So like could go into the museum with just a few people that basically get it from themselves. I think those are great ways, to keep it access to the people of the community. Um, yeah, I think
Oh, that's cool. And then just as
yeah.
far as on a human level, I didn't know. I assume that most artists don't necessarily work in isolation all the time. So just anything you might share about what this time has been like in terms of you connecting with friends and with other artists. Just anything you might share as far as if there's been anything that you have that you've learned or that you've that's been formative for you.
I mean, it's definitely like being able to reach out with people more. I know the Zoom has helped out, but feeling comfortable enough to be like, hey, could you guys maybe take a look at this through Instagram or get on Zoom and let me show you like a picture of what I've been working on. I think it's helped, kind of like build more of a little. It's helped with people. I'm trying to think of what to say. The community, like, be able to reach out with the community. It's because we're all going through the same thing, and
Yeah.
so it's not to be worried about, well, am I bothering this person? Feel like no, everyone wants to help you out, and we're all going through this together. So I think it's definitely brought everyone together a little bit better. I feel like, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as, and I guess too, on the flip side of that, I wonder if, in terms of not as many opportunities to connect with, people coming into an exhibit, I didn't know if there's any sense of, if there's any sense of missing anything in terms of being able to have, when you, let's say, for instance, if you have work displayed at an exhibit and there may in general be less people that are coming in to actually see the work, in person just in terms
Yeah.
of what that's been like and in terms of there being less of that overall.
Yeah. And so like what I found out too is this last year, I've still had some of my pieces in exhibits, but they've been on online exhibits. I think that kind of loses, seeing the piece of work on a computer screen is going to be a lot different than seeing it in person. So like I was mentioning earlier, some of my woodblock prints I've done have been they're pretty large scale, but you can't tell that on computer. So I think that kind of loses that, just really seeing what the piece is in general. I think that's something that we are losing, not being able to see it in person.
Yeah, and then just the energy of, I just envision and remember in my, just in terms of in my memory, going to a place like Living Arts and seeing, just the building full of people and just
Yeah.
remembering what that vibe felt like, and that
Yeah. Just
energy.
like the energy of just having everyone there and everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all the conversations as well that seem to come up, when you've got
Mhm.
people moving through, a lot of people moving through a gallery space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely really appreciate you taking the time, David. This has been great just to get an opportunity to meet you and learn a little more about the work that you're doing. And it really means a lot that you've taken this time. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah. And thank you for having me on here.
Certainly. Thanks again.